Welcome to Uncle Da's Wealth and Wisdom Diary, a finance reading channel that hopes every follower can become richer. Today's in-depth reading is The Snowball. This is a biography about Warren Buffett. Speaking of Warren Buffett, most people's first impression is that he's the god of stocks, a wealth myth of reaching the top as the world's richest man through value investing. Many people copy his holdings and memorize his famous quotes, charging into the market with the belief of buying good companies and holding them for the long term. In the end, they either return in defeat or come to the conclusion that his success can't be replicated. But that is precisely the deepest misunderstanding of Buffett. We only fixate on the wealth figures he's amassed in the stock market, yet overlook that what has carried him through nearly 70 years of investing is a complete, integrated operating system for life. Reducing Buffett's achievements to the 4 words, value investing, ends up wasting this whole system to a great extent. His methodology has never been limited to picking stocks, but is a set of underlying principles about decision-making, cognition, desire management, and long-termism, enough to cover every dimension of career, life, and wealth. The first and most common cognitive misconception is equating Buffett's success with buying stocks and holding them for the long term, thinking he won because of extraordinary patience. This completely reverses cause and effect. A fact that is rarely faced head-on is that 99% of Buffett's wealth was earned after he turned 50. This isn't because he lacked patience in the first half of his life, nor is it some magnificent miracle simply piled up by time. Rather, over decades he built a closed-loop wealth system, from the early cigar but strategy to embracing high-quality businesses, from building a cash flow pipeline through insurance float, to turning Berkshire into an ecosystem where industry and capital move in tandem. His long-term approach has never been a matter of passively just toughing it out. It is the natural result of a matured system. Most people only learn the act of holding, but failed to see the deep penetration into business models behind it, the ultimate control over cash flow, and zero tolerance for risk. Long-term holding without system support is, in essence, nothing more than self-comfort after being trapped. The second common misconception is attributing Buffett's success to luck and the dividends of the times, thinking he merely happened to catch the golden era of the U.S. economy. The times did indeed give him a runway wide enough. But in the same period, there were plenty of people who started from a higher point and had better resources. Wall Street tycoons were everywhere. So why was it only he who ultimately rolled up the biggest wealth snowball in human history? In fact, Buffett's career spanned more than a dozen economic recessions, several rounds of stock market bubbles, and multiple geopolitical crises. His victories were never a matter of cruising to an easy win with the wind at his back, but the result of staying clear-headed in every bout of frenzy and holding fast to his principles in every wave of panic. He avoided the collapse of the dot-com bubble. He weathered the financial tsunami of 2008, always adhering to investment discipline that runs counter to human nature. The times brought the same rain down on everyone, only he had repaired the reservoir in advance, turning the rain into his own snowball. The third deeply rooted misconception is thinking Buffett's approach is too far removed from ordinary people, and that only big money can replicate it. This is narrowing value investing down to stock-picking tricks. In fact, the core principle at the heart of Buffett's system is to stick to your circle of competence. Leave a sufficient margin of safety in your decisions, and judge everything from a long-term perspective. Refuse to pay for things outside your understanding. Not a single one of these applies only to the stock market. At work, focus deeply on the track you're good at, rather than blindly chasing hot trends. When making major choices in life, leave room for error, rather than betting everything. When spending, distinguish between assets and liabilities. Put your resources into things that appreciate in the long run. These principles are so simple they're easy to overlook. Yet they're exactly the life algorithm ordinary people can put into practice right away. And this biography, written by Alice Schroder, is the best entry point for breaking down this life operating system. Unlike the success books on the market written from a fan's perspective, Schroder is a seasoned Wall Street analyst. She followed Buffett for 5 years, interviewing more than 250 closely connected people, and, in a documentary style, reconstructs the real Buffett, unmythologized. He doesn't teach you stock-picking tricks or pile-on wealth figures. What it truly lays bare is how Buffett the person was forged. His wealth awakening, decision-making logic, cultivation of human nature, and the process of building his system. After finishing this book, you won't immediately become a stock market god, nor will you get rich overnight, but you will gain a transferable underlying algorithm for making clear-headed choices in an uncertain world. How to keep accumulating continuously. How to steadily roll your life snowball bigger and bigger. Next, we'll start from the origin point of his growth and break down, step by step, the core construction of this system to see how the logic that changed Buffett's life can be put to use by you. When many people talk about Buffett, they always like to sum up his success with the 4 words, born a stock god, as if he was born with an innate talent for investing and had grasped the essence of wealth at a young age. But if we rewind time back to his childhood and teenage years, you'll discover a very clear truth. All of Buffett's later investment philosophy and decision-making habits, even his personality traits, can be traced back to a complete source code in his early experiences. He wasn't born with a perfect investor's temperament. Instead, through the positive feedback from one small matter after another, he continuously iterated his understanding and behavior, and ultimately refined a highly stable operating system for life. Understanding this is crucial. If Buffett's success came from an unreplicable gift, then it would be meaningless for ordinary people to study it. But if his system was installed step by step and iterated again and again, then that means we can likewise, through deliberate practice, install the same underlying logic into our own lives. Next, we'll start from the origin point of his growth and see how this operating system that changed the history of wealth in the world was built from 0 to 1. Buffett's sensitivity to numbers and wealth had already shown a clear early outline as early as age 6. That year, the whole family went on vacation. He bought a pack of chewing gum wholesale from his grandfather's grocery store for 25 cents. The whole pack had 5 pieces in total. Most other kids selling things would probably split it up and sell them individually. If someone bought 1 piece, they'd sell 1 piece. It seemed flexible and adaptable. But Buffett refused to do that. He insisted on selling the whole pack. Each time he had to sell all 5 pieces, steadily making a 5-cent markup. Many people thought this was a kid being stubborn and rigid, but they didn't see that behind it were the 2 most core, fundamental traits of his entire life. The first was extreme risk aversion. He was afraid that after splitting it open, the remaining pieces wouldn't sell and would end up stuck with him, losing his principal. In his way of thinking, a certain 5-cent profit was far better than an uncertain higher profit. He'd rather earn less than take on any possibility of a loss. The second is an innate quantitative mindset. He didn't make vague decisions, and he didn't earn money he couldn't make sense of. This extreme vigilance against losses wasn't some grand principle he later learned from books. Was an instinct etched into his bones when he was selling chewing gum at 6. Many people think the core of value investing is making a lot of money. But Buffett's #1 rule throughout his life has always been, don't lose money. The starting point of this rule lies in that pack of chewing gum from his childhood, relying on this finely tuned operation. With this, Buffett, who was still in middle school at the time, could steadily earn $175 a month. What does that amount represent? In the United States in the 1940s, a typical adult blue-collar worker's monthly wage was only a little over $300. A kid in his early teens could earn half an adult's monthly income just by delivering newspapers. And it was a steady cash flow, unaffected by weather or mood. More importantly, he spent almost none of the money he earned. He saved it all. He never saved money to buy toys or trade in for a new car, but rather genuinely enjoyed the game of making money make money. He treated every penny he had as a seed, firmly believing that the principal he saved today will grow into more money in the future. When he was still in his teens, he had already worked it out in a notebook. If $100 maintained 10% growth each year, after 10 years, it would become $259. And after 20 years, it would become $673. The longer the time, the more astonishing the growth. He wasn't enamored with money itself. He was obsessed with the exponential growth brought by compound interest. believing that as long as there was enough time, even a small principal could roll into a huge snowball. So you see, Buffett's childhood experiences had already installed three most fundamental kernels in his life's operating system. The first was extreme risk aversion. The safety of his principal always came first. The second was an ultimate quantitative mindset, calculating input and output in everything. He rejected fuzzy decision-making. The third was an absolute belief in compound interest. He believed in the power of long-term accumulation. These three kernels were the starting point for all of his later investment approaches. They were also the underlying logic he never wavered from across nearly 70 years in the market. If we say his childhood experiences installed the underlying kernels of his operating system, then Benjamin Graham was the one who built a complete system framework for him. Before he met Graham, although Buffett had already started buying and selling stocks, and had also amassed his first pot of gold through various small businesses, at heart he was still self-taught and unorthodox. His investing relied on intuition and scattered tricks. He hadn't formed a complete system that could be replicated and iterated. That wasn't until he read Graham's The Intelligent Investor, and then got into Columbia University, where he studied systematically under Graham. Only then did he truly step through the door into value investing. Graham infused Buffett's framework with three core concepts that remain cornerstones of value investing to this day. The first core concept is the margin of safety. Simply put, it means when you buy a company's stock, you can't buy it at its fair value. You must leave enough room for a discount. So you give yourself some margin for error. In Graham's era, the standards were extremely strict. A company's stock price had to be below 2/3 of its net working capital to qualify. So-called net working capital is a company's current assets, minus all liabilities, which is equivalent to the net cash shareholders could get if the company immediately went bankrupt and was liquidated. In other words, it's like spending 40 cents to buy $1 of net cash. Even if the company were liquidated right away, investors wouldn't lose money. They could even reliably pocket the spread. This is the ultimate margin of safety, reducing the possibility of loss to almost zero. The second core concept is Mr. Market. Graham likened the stock market to a gentleman with extremely unstable emotions. Every trading day, he would come by and quote you a price. Sometimes he's extremely optimistic and will quote a price far above its value. You don't need to agree with his emotions, let alone follow his rhythm. When he quotes a high price, you can sell the stock to him. When he quotes a low price, you can buy from him. But you must never let his emotions lead you by the nose. Still less can you take his quotes as the company's true value. This concept completely resolved Buffett's anxiety about market volatility, making him understand that short-term ups and downs in stock prices simply don't matter. The company's intrinsic value itself is what matters most. The third core concept is cigar but stock investing. In other words, what's commonly known as picking up cigar butts. It's like walking down the street and picking up someone else's discarded cigarette butt. Even though there's only one last puff left, you don't have to pay for it. It's a free bargain you get for nothing. Applied to the stock market, it refers to companies whose share prices have fallen far below their liquidation value. Even if the company's operations are so-so and its prospects are ordinary, as long as the price is cheap enough, you buy in and then wait for the price to revert back toward its intrinsic value. You can reliably pocket the price difference. This is Graham's most core investment approach, and it was also the primary profit model in Buffett's early investing career. After studying under Graham, Buffett turned his early business intuition into a systematized methodology. His investment performance also began to skyrocket. The most classic battle among them was the Geico investment in 1951. At the time, Buffett made a special trip to Washington to conduct on-site research into this insurance company. He confirmed that its business model was highly competitive. After he came back, he invested almost all of his savings at the time, $10,282, into it. In just 2 years, this investment doubled. Buffett earned the first large stock market profit of his life. But few people noticed that. This victory was actually Buffett's first departure from his teacher's method. Geico simply didn't meet Graham's cigar but stock standards. It wasn't a cheap, lousy company on the verge of liquidation. It was a high-quality company with tremendous growth potential. Buffett bought it not only because the price offered a margin of safety, but also because he believed in the company's long-term business value. At this point, Buffett was still strictly following Graham's system. But deep down, his sensitivity to the essence of a business had already begun to surpass purely numerical calculations, laying the groundwork for his later cognitive upgrade. Overall, what Graham gave Buffett was a safety cushion for his entire investing career. He taught Buffett how to never suffer a major loss in the market, how to preserve the principal under any extreme market conditions. This set of methodologies gave Buffett an exceptionally high floor for his investing. It enabled him to proceed steadily and surely in the early stage of his investing career, never experiencing any major losses. It built up the most solid first pot of gold for the wealth snowball that came later. If Graham gave Buffett the floor for investing, then Charlie Munger gave him the ceiling for wealth. Before meeting Munger, Buffett was a staunch believer in the cigar butt approach, focusing only on whether the price was cheap, without caring whether the company was any good. But Munger's arrival completely shattered his ingrained views. It pushed his investment framework through the most important upgrade of his life. The two met in the 1960s. Munger was a few years older than Buffett and had a broader way of thinking, and he placed more emphasis on the essence of the business rather than just the numbers. He poured cold water on Buffett right then. You keep picking up those cigar butts of lousy companies every day. Even if you can occasionally make a little money, you'll never achieve anything big. A mediocre or even terrible company, no matter how cheaply you buy it, if you hold it for the long term, your ultimate return will be just as mediocre as the company's quality. Conversely, if you buy a great company at a reasonable price and hold it for the long term, it will generate profits for you in a steady, endless stream. The longer the time, the greater the power of compounding. For Buffett, these words were like a cognitive shock blow. All of his past experience had told him that cheap is the only hard truth. But Munger made him realize for the first time that between being cheap and being good, the latter is the core of long-term compounding. The value reversion of a cheap cigar but happens once, and then it's over. But a great company's intrinsic value will keep growing. Time will be on your side. What truly made Buffett completely convinced of this principle was the acquisition of See's Candies. It didn't need ongoing heavy capital investment to sustain profit growth. The current price didn't look cheap, but viewed on a 10 or 20-year horizon, it was absolutely a bargain. In the end, Buffett was persuaded and completed the acquisition for $25 million. The subsequent results completely validated Munger's judgment. Over the following decades, See's Candies' profits continued to grow steadily, requiring almost no additional capital, while generating an endless stream of cash flow. To this day, See's Candies has contributed more than $1 billion in cumulative profits to Berkshire, and that figure is still increasing year by year. This investment made Buffett fully realize that buying a great company at a fair price is far more worthwhile than buying a mediocre company at a cheap price. From then on, Buffett's investment framework completed its final iterative loop. He was no longer fixated on picking up cigar butts, but instead began looking for truly great companies with wide moats that can continuously generate free cash flow, buy at a reasonable price, and hold for the long term. From Coca-Cola to Gillette, from Apple to American Express, all of his later classic investment cases were essentially a continuation of this methodology. So there's always been a saying in the industry. Graham gave Buffett the lower bound of investing, ensuring he would never lose big money. Munger gave him the upper bound of wealth, enabling him to roll up the biggest snowball of wealth in human history. Without Graham, Buffett might have taken many detours. He might even have lost his principal in some market turbulence. Without Munger, Buffett might have been just a somewhat well-known value investor, never able to reach the pinnacle of the world's wealth. At this point, Buffett's underlying operating system had already been fully installed. His childhood experiences gave him the core kernel of risk aversion, quantitative thinking, and a belief in compounding. Graham gave him the system framework of a margin of safety in Mr. Market. Munger then completed the system's final upgrade, taking him from buying cheap to fully embracing buying good. But no matter how perfect an operating system is, it still needs specific execution rules to unleash its power. How did Buffett turn this underlying logic into day-to-day investment decisions? And what operating standards in stock selection, position holding, and risk control can ordinary people also reuse? The second part coming up. We'll break down the operating rules of this system and see how Buffett's investment framework really runs so steadily. In many people's minds, Buffett is a label like value investing guru. Buy great companies and hold them for the long term without budging, relying on patience to grind his way into becoming the world's richest man. This stereotype has created the biggest cognitive illusion in investing. Countless people take Buffett's post-60 investment approach and apply it directly to themselves. Buy a few blue-chip stocks and then claim they're value investors, only to end up either unable to hold on midway and panic sell out, or, after losing money, declare that value investing has already failed. But the real Buffett has never been someone who rigidly clings to dogma. His investment methodology went through 3 complete evolutions over nearly 70 years of his career. Each one precisely corresponded to changes in his capital base, the limits of his understanding, and the market environment. From his early days as a hedge fund manager hunting for bargains everywhere, to a middle-aged industrial investor holding great companies, and then, in his later years, a master capital allocator in control of a business empire. He kept iterating his own algorithm and never stayed in the same place. If you don't understand these 3 evolutions, you'll never truly understand Buffett's success, let alone learn the essence of his system. Next, we'll break it down layer by layer along the timeline to look at the 3 key leaps in Buffett's investment system and the core playbook, underlying logic, and boundaries of applicability at each stage. Stage 1, the partnership era. Arbitrage, cigar butts, and control. In 1956, 26-year-old Buffett graduated from Columbia Business School and returned to his hometown of Omaha with Graham's theoretical framework, founding his first limited partnership fund. From its official launch in 1957 to its announced dissolution in 1969, over the course of 13 years, he delivered a track record that could be called a miracle. The compound annual return reached 29.5%, and cumulative gains increased 27-fold, while over the same period the S&P 500 only rose by 1 times. Even more astonishingly, over those 13 years, it didn't have a single year with losses. Even in years when the broader market plunged sharply, it could still maintain steady positive returns. Behind this performance was fundamentally not the well-known buy and hold, but rather a combination of 3 completely different profit-making weapons. At this time, Buffett's way of operating was closer to that of today's multi-strategy hedge fund managers, rather than the laid-back value investor people picture. The first type of investment was undervalued plays, namely the classic cigar but stock strategy. There was no internet, no real-time market quote software, and there was a sufficiently thick margin of safety he would dare to buy. The holding period for this kind of investment is usually quite short, ranging from a few months to 1 or 2 years. In essence, it's a trading gain from valuation re-rating. It has absolutely nothing to do with the logic of long-term holding great companies. The second type of weapon is arbitrage investing, and it was also Buffett's core secret in his early years for smoothing returns and getting through both bull and bear markets. The most common is merger arbitrage. When a listed company announces it's being acquired, the acquirer will usually offer an acquisition price higher than the current market price before the acquisition is officially completed. The target company's share price will be slightly below the agreed acquisition price. The difference in between is the arbitrage spread. As long as the acquisition is ultimately completed smoothly, you can reliably earn that spread. The returns have almost nothing to do with whether the broader market rises or falls. Buffett has extremely strict quantitative criteria for arbitrage trades. He carefully assesses the probability that the acquisition will be completed, the risk of the deal falling through, and the potential return and loss ratio. He only makes a move when the odds of success are extremely high and the risk-reward ratio is attractive enough. The annualized return on this type of investment can be kept steadily above 20%. Even in a bear market, it can still deliver sustained positive returns. It's precisely because arbitrage-type assets provide the foundation. that Buffett was able to outperform the index every single year for 13 years. Even when the market plunges, it isn't affected. Many people only know that Buffett is great at buying stocks, but they don't realize that arbitrage trades accounted for a fairly large proportion of his early returns. The third type of weapon is control-type investments. When he finds a company that's cheap enough but poorly run, Buffett won't just passively wait for the market to fix it. Instead, he would buy enough shares to gain control of the company and actively step in to run it. He would increase the company's value by optimizing management, divesting bad assets, and improving operating efficiency. The most classic example is Dempster Mill Manufacturing. After taking control, he brought in professional managers and cut the inefficient lines of business. Even with a hint of ferocity, he was both a deep value discoverer and an active value creator. He could profit both from the market's mistakes and from improvements in operations. His partnership was more like a flexible, multi-strategy fund, with dynamic allocation across 3 types of assets. He could find ways to profit in different market environments. What's most worth ordinary people reflecting on at this stage is, small amounts of capital have their own ways of playing the game. When the amount of capital isn't large, use the market's inefficiencies to do flexible trading and arbitrage. It's often more efficient than stubbornly holding onto a few big companies. Many people, as soon as they enter the market, copy Buffett's later-stage long-term holding approach. Instead, they waste the natural advantage of small capital, being like a small boat that can turn around quickly. The second stage, the Berkshire era, moats and float. 1969. At 39, Buffett made a decision that surprised all of Wall Street. He dissolved the partnership that had been operating for 13 years and transferred all his personal funds into Berkshire Hathaway. The direct reason for this choice was that U.S. stocks were in the midst of a major bull market. Market sentiment was extremely frenzied, and overall valuations rose sharply. Cheap cigar but stocks that met Graham's standards had almost disappeared. Buffett was unwilling to lower his investment standards to chase rising prices, so he simply liquidated the fund. He completely transitioned from a fund manager managing other people's money to an entrepreneur and investor in control of his own capital. This transformation was the most important turning point in Buffett's investing career. From then on, he no longer needed to deal with the pressure of client redemptions, no longer needing to compete each year in short-term performance rankings. He gained fully independent control over how his funds were allocated. And it was precisely at this stage that his investment framework completed its second evolution, shifting completely from bargain hunting to buying great companies. At the same time, he built the core engine that lets wealth grow exponentially, insurance float. First, let's talk about the magic of float. This is the most crucial key to understanding Berkshire's wealth miracle. And it's also a prerequisite that the vast majority of ordinary people simply don't have. So-called float is the premiums an insurance company collects from policyholders before future claims occur. This money stays in the insurance company's accounts the whole time and can be freely used by the insurer for investment. Simply put, it's an interest-free pool of funds where you get paid first and pay out later. What's even more brilliant is, if an insurance company does a good job with its underwriting business, so that premium income is greater than claims payouts and operating costs, then this float not only has no cost, it can actually make money. It's like someone lending you money to use, and even paying you interest on top of it. This is the lowest cost leverage in the world. In 1976, Buffett began buying large amounts of Geico. At the time, the company's float was $47 million. By 2007, the insurance float under Berkshire had already exceeded $60 billion. This enormous pool of zero-cost capital continuously flowed into Buffett's investment system, amplifying his investment returns and becoming the core driving force behind his wealth snowball rolling faster and faster. Many people calculate Buffett's annualized returns, looking only at the returns from his stock picking, but overlook the leverage-amplifying effect of float. Berkshire's true returns are the combined result of investment returns plus the leverage from float. And this kind of leverage is completely different from ordinary margin financing and securities lending. It has no fixed maturity date, and you won't be forced to liquidate just because the stock price dips in the short term. as long as the insurance business continues to operate soundly. This money can be used indefinitely. This is also why Buffett can stay calm in the face of a stock market crash and have the confidence to hold large positions for the long term. He never has to worry about being forced to sell at a loss at the bottom of the market. After securing stable long-term capital, Buffett's stock-picking logic also underwent a complete upgrade, officially taking shape as a mature, moat-based investment theory. Under Munger's continued influence, he completely broke free from Graham's limitation of looking only at price and not at quality, and began searching for great companies with long-term competitive advantages. He likened a company's competitive advantage to a moat, like the moat around a castle, which can fend off attacks from competitors, allowing the business to sustain above normal profits over the long term. Common moats can be divided into 4 categories. The first category is a brand moat, such as Coca-Cola and Gillette razors. Consumers have extremely strong emotional loyalty to the brand and are willing to pay an ongoing premium for it. The second category is the economies of scale moat. The larger the company, the lower the operating cost per unit. New entrants simply can't compete with it in a price war. The third category is a network effects moat. The more users there are, the greater the product's value. It's hard for later entrants to overturn it. For example, credit card payment networks. The fourth category is a switching cost moat. The cost for users to switch products is extremely high. They'd rather put up with high prices than migrate. For example, enterprise software and banks' core accounts. The most classic investment case at this stage was the large-scale purchase of Coca-Cola in 1988. At the time, Buffett invested a total of $593 million, becoming one of Coca-Cola's largest shareholders. This investment didn't fit Graham's cigar, but standard at all. At the time, Coca-Cola's P/E ratio was already in a reasonable range. The stock price was far higher than its book net assets, leaving no room at all to pick it up cheap. But what Buffett valued was Coca-Cola's globally unbeatable brand moat, its omnipresent distribution network, and its business ability to keep raising prices without losing customers. Facts proved his judgment 10 years after buying in. The market value of this investment rose to $11.6 billion. Over 20 years, it increased 20-fold in total. More importantly, Coca-Cola also pays out dividends year after year without end, providing a steady, stable cash flow. From this point on, Buffett's profit logic changed completely. He no longer made quick money from valuation recoveries. Instead, he made slow money from a company's long-term growth and dividends, no longer trading frequently to turn over positions. Instead, he chose great companies to travel alongside for the long term. In the second stage, Buffett completed his transformation from a trader into a true investor. He found a long-term, stable source of capital, and also found high-quality assets that could weather economic cycles. The two were deeply combined. In her 90th year, she considered cashing out the company. After Buffett heard about it, he talked with her for just 1 hour, and on the spot decided to complete the acquisition for $55 million. There was no complicated due diligence, no auditing of the financial statement details. It was based entirely on trust in Mrs. B's character and ability. After the acquisition was completed, Buffett indeed did not interfere in operations at all. In her 90s, Mrs. B still went to work at the company every day, and the furniture mall's business kept getting better and better. This deal later became a classic win-win in business history. Buffett bought a high-quality machine that generated a steady stream of cash flow, and Mrs. B kept the business she'd built over her lifetime, along with the livelihoods of all the employees. By this stage, what Buffett was making money from was no longer market fluctuations at all, but rather the real, tangible money generated by the company's operations. He no longer cared about the stock price going up or down each day, and he didn't even care whether it was a bull market or a bear market, because the whole company was his. The stock price's short-term fluctuations had nothing to do with him. His daily work was to review the operating financial reports of each subsidiary. But that is precisely the biggest misunderstanding. Buffett's real moat has never been a handful of stocks, but rather Berkshire Hathaway's unique organizational and capital structure. It's a wealth-building machine refined over half a century. The design of every single component serves long-term value. And the core logic of this structure is something most individuals and companies can neither learn nor replicate. Most people's understanding of Berkshire stops at the superficial label of Buffett's investment company, without seeing clearly that, in essence, it is a meticulously designed wealth ecosystem. Use an organization with extreme decentralization to recruit the best managers from around the world. Use insurance float to provide a steady stream of zero-cost ammunition. Then use unique corporate governance to select long-term shareholders on the same wavelength. The three are tightly interlinked. Together, they underpin this business empire spanning dozens of industries and valued at trillions of dollars. Berkshire's organizational structure is counterintuitive at its very core. It owns more than 70 wholly owned subsidiaries. Its businesses span dozens of areas, including insurance, railroads, energy, retail, manufacturing, aviation, and more. Its total global workforce exceeds 300,000. It is a bona fide commercial behemoth. Yet the headquarters that supports this vast empire has only a little over 20 employees. There is no massive centralized functional hub. No multi-layered reporting system with approvals at every step. It rarely even holds unified strategic planning meetings or monthly operating meetings. At a time when the vast majority of Fortune Global 500 companies are emphasizing refined, meticulous group control and management, Berkshire's headquarters is more like a quiet capital dispatch room. As the helmsman of the entire empire, Buffett has only two core tasks: capital allocation and the appointment, removal, and incentives of key managers. Beyond that, all the specific operational matters of each subsidiary, from product pricing and supply chain management to team hiring and market strategy, he doesn't get involved in any of it. And he almost never proactively calls subsidiary CEOs to ask about business details. His day-to-day way of working is as simple as it gets. Subsidiaries regularly send their financial statements to headquarters. After Buffett reads them, he pools the free cash flow generated by the companies at headquarters for centralized allocation, then reallocates it into higher return assets, nothing more than that. The underlying understanding behind this management model is that truly great management is never about managing everything, but clearly knowing what shouldn't be managed. Buffett's logic is very straightforward. Every company he acquires already has the best management team in its industry. These people have been deeply rooted in the industry for decades and understand the specific business better than he does. And they understand changes in the frontline market better than he does. If headquarters gives orders and meddles through layers of hierarchy, it will only interfere with professional judgment and reduce decision-making efficiency, and may even wear down managers' sense of ownership. Rather than spending energy on supervision and direction, it's better to be strict at the hiring/selection stage and choose the right people. Then give them 100% trust and full authority. After many companies grow larger, headquarters can easily fall into the trap of a desire for control, constantly setting up new departments, adding more approval steps, and rolling out all kinds of rules and regulations, claiming it's risk control, but in reality, it drains the vitality of the front line, making the entire organization bloated and sluggish. Berkshire's extreme decentralization is essentially trading extreme strictness in selecting people for extreme efficiency in using them. Buffett's standard for choosing people has never been about how impressive their resume is, or how polished their track record looks, but whether the other person truly loves this line of work, whether they run the company as if it were their own child. Just like Mrs. B of Nebraska Furniture Mart, who, in her 90s, still spends every day in the store and knows the price of every single item inside out. Managers like this don't need anyone to supervise them at all. This model of extreme decentralization, in turn, became a core competitive advantage for Berkshire's acquisitions. Many founders of family businesses are willing to sell their companies to Berkshire, not because Buffett offers the highest price, but because they know that after selling the company, they are still the owners of the business and can still run it according to their own principles, without having to face Wall Street's short-term performance pressure, and without having to deal with headquarters bureaucracy. For many founders who have poured their whole lives into their companies, This respect and freedom are more appealing than selling for tens of millions of dollars more. If an extremely decentralized organizational structure is Berkshire's skeleton, then insurance float is the core fuel that drives this machine at high speed. Many people marvel at Buffett's investment returns. The facts have also borne this out. Berkshire, which has not paid dividends for decades, has seen its stock price rise far more than the vast majority of high-dividend companies. Now let's look at the logic behind not splitting the stock. Paired with not paying dividends is Buffett's long-standing insistence on not splitting the stock. At its core, a stock split by a listed company is breaking up a high par value share into multiple low par value shares, lowering the investment threshold and attracting more retail investors, increasing the stock's liquidity. This is standard Wall Street practice. Almost every company whose share price rises will do this. But Buffett deliberately goes against the grain. As of 2007, Berkshire Hathaway Class A shares had already reached $140,000 per share, calculated at the exchange rate at the time. Buying a single lot would cost over 10 million yuan. It's the most expensive stock in the world in terms of price per share. With such a high investment threshold, it naturally keeps most short-term speculators out. Buffett's thinking is very clear. What he wanted were partners who believe in long-term value. The management team then has no choice but to cater to short-term performance. Whereas most of the shareholders selected by a high share price are those who truly understand the Berkshire model. Investors willing to stick with the company as it grows over the long term. They won't get anxious over short-term stock price fluctuations, much less tell Buffett how to invest. Later, Berkshire introduced Class B shares, only to meet the needs of small investors, while also making it easier for subsidiaries to do stock swaps and acquisitions. Meanwhile, the Class A shares have always maintained an extremely high price per share, sticking to their positioning as long-term partners. This is the power of an internal scorecard. When the whole world is saying you're wrong, you still have the courage to stick to your own judgment. Because the yardstick by which you judge yourself has never been other people's applause or insults, but whether you've done the right thing. For ordinary people, this realization is almost a wonder drug for easing life's anxiety. The vast majority of our troubles and anxiety, in essence, all come from an external scorecard. Comparing salaries with classmates, comparing promotions with colleagues, comparing houses and cars with friends. We live within other people's system of evaluation, desperately chasing the success defined by society. Once you switch to an internal scorecard, life will immediately feel at least half as hard. You don't need to prove yourself at every hot trend. You only need to stick to your own principles and do what you've decided is worth doing. It's enough to improve just a little compared to who you were yesterday. External evaluations are all temporary. Only your own genuine feelings about life are the final answer. Among all of Buffett's views on life, the ovarian lottery is the one that best reflects his humility and clear-headedness. More than once, Buffett has openly admitted in public that the achievements I have today are to a large extent because I won the ovarian lottery, and I had excellent parents. All of these are strokes of luck I had no say in. The so-called ovarian lottery refers to the era, country, family, and talents a person is born with. All these innate factors are like a random draw. They are completely beyond an individual's control, yet to a large extent determine the starting point and upper limit of one's life. Buffett, or in an era of war and turmoil, even with great investing talent, he simply wouldn't have had a stage to put it to use. We can use a set of numbers to understand this more intuitively. Among the several billion people worldwide, billions of people live on less than $2 a day. They spend their entire lives rushing about just to get by, with no chance at all to receive a good education, let alone invest and manage their finances to move up a social class. Whereas we are born in a peaceful, stable country with sustained economic growth, with opportunities to get an education and the freedom to choose a career, and the possibility of improving our lives through hard work. That fact alone already puts us ahead of most people in the world. So today they learn programming, and tomorrow they make short videos. The day after tomorrow they go study new technical concepts again. After staying busy for years, they still haven't truly mastered a single thing. But in fact, ordinary people don't need to understand everything at all. You don't need to understand finance. You don't need to understand technology. And you don't need to understand every hot topic. As long as you thoroughly understand that one thing in your own field and build your own core competitiveness, that's enough for you to live very well. True masters first hold firm to their own circle of competence. Take what's within that circle to the extreme and build an absolute advantage. And then slowly and cautiously expand your boundaries, instead of running around everywhere before you've even secured those boundaries. And in the end, not being able to gain a foothold anywhere. The essence of the circle of competence principle is acknowledging your own limitations. You can't be good at everything. You can't seize every opportunity, nor can you make everyone satisfied. Accept this. Focus your limited energy on what you're truly good at and what truly matters, and you'll actually get the greatest return. With that said, we've already broken down Buffett's investment system, his empire structure, and the whole set of life wisdom that has supported him in steadily accumulating wealth for decades. I believe many people will feel this way. You understand all the principles, but why is it so hard to actually do them? The answer is actually very simple. There's a huge gap between knowing and doing. The name of that gap is human nature. What's most remarkable about Buffett has never been how many principles he understands, but that he can align what he knows with what he does for a lifetime. Over the long span of decades, he has always held fast to these simplest principles. He didn't cling to endless expansion. Instead, he proactively began the second half of his life of scattering the snowball. In the next part, we'll focus on his mindset and choices in his later years, and talk about a clearer ultimate answer to life beyond the end point of wealth accumulation. At the same time, we'll break down practical methods that ordinary people can actually apply. Turn Buffett's complete life algorithm into your own compounding in life. In the first 4 parts, the Buffett we saw was always a tireless snowball pusher. Starting with saving up his first coin in childhood, he spent his entire life doing the same one thing. In Buffett's life, Susan was never an ordinary housewife. She was Buffett's spiritual partner, a buffer between him and the outside world, and, even more, the default planner for everything that would come after his life. Buffett devoted his entire life to investing and lived an extremely minimalist life. He had almost no interest in worldly affairs. He always took it for granted that Susan would outlive him and handle all the estate arrangements for him, managing the future charitable foundation. For the first time, he was forced to confront a question he had never seriously thought about before when he leaves this world. Where, exactly, should this astronomical fortune go? For the more than 70 years before that, Buffett's life had only one keyword: accumulation. He was like a precision machine, day after day increasing Berkshire's net assets. And the wealth figures were more like a game's scoreboard to him, rather than resources that could be spent. He lived in the old house he bought decades ago. He ate simple hamburgers and drank Coke. It made him suddenly realize that the slope of life has an end. There's no Buffett building, no Buffett hospital. There's no Buffett scholarship. A way to gain social prestige and extend personal influence. Naming rights are an indispensable ritual, but Buffett doesn't need any of that. He has already left a deep enough mark on the world through his own abilities. He doesn't need to prove he ever existed by carving his name. Is a career worth devoting your entire life to. It lets you have sustained passion over the long years to keep rolling the snowball. It is family and friends who truly treat each other sincerely, so you won't be lonely on the long uphill road. Many people spend their whole lives looking for wetter snow, but ignore the length of the slope, winning short-term gains, while losing their health or sacrificing close relationships. In the end, when the slope breaks off, even the wettest snow is meaningless. Bit by bit, rolling your life into something more and more solid. The growth, focus, passion, and companionship within this process are things far more precious than any number on a wealth statement. At this point, we've already followed Buffett through the better part of his life and seen his growth, evolution, peak, and pivot. He spent his whole life proving a simple logic. With the right approach and long-term persistence, ordinary people can roll their own snowball. But in the end, the story belongs to someone else. In the concluding chapter that follows, we'll distill everything into a compound interest life guide that ordinary people can actually follow. When we close this book, The Snowball, we don't need to envy Buffett's wealth figures. nor do we need to force ourselves to replicate Berkshire's business empire. For ordinary people, the most valuable thing about this book is that it breaks down a transferable life algorithm into actionable principles you can actually implement. Setting aside complex stock picking techniques and capital games, we can at least take 5 things from Buffett's life that we can use right away. The first, build your own internal scorecard. This is the most direct antidote to easing anxiety in life. You can set a tiny habit for yourself. Set aside 10 minutes each week to review and ask yourself, in the past week, which things did I genuinely agree with and want to do well, and which were just done to show others? Done only out of fear of being judged? From something as small as a deliberate show-off to something as big as choosing a job or switching tracks. Run everything through this question once, and you'll find that most of the inner turmoil in life comes from living within other people's systems of judgment. Take back the right to judge your own life into your own hands. Focus on your own standards, and don't let external voices lead you by the nose. A lot of worries will naturally fade away. The second thing, find your circle of competence, and hold on to it firmly. No need to be anxious just because others know more than you do. You also don't need to force yourself to chase every hot trend. You don't need to become a jack of all trades. You don't need to understand every emerging industry. Just cultivate your own small patch of ground thoroughly and build an irreplaceable core advantage. That alone is enough to support you in living a dignified and unhurried life. Knowing what you don't understand is far more important than pretending you understand everything. Hold your boundaries and don't charge ahead blindly. This will take you further and more steadily than greedy, all-encompassing expansion. True masters never win on breadth. They win on a sense of boundaries. The third thing is to understand the essence of compound interest, and not to interrupt it lightly. Many people think compound interest is just a concept in financial management, but it's the underlying logic that applies to your whole life. Knowledge is compound interest. Read for half an hour every day. You won't see much difference in a year, but in 5 years it will create a huge gap in understanding. Skills are compound interest. Refine one small detail every day. Over the long run, you can become an expert in your field. Health is compound interest. Keep a regular routine and stick to exercising. You won't feel it in the short term. The further you go, the more it becomes your greatest wealth. Relationships are compound interest too. Treat the people around you with sincerity. Trust built up over the long term is more useful than any temporary connections. The key to compound interest has never been short-term explosive power. It's long-term consistency. Don't interrupt it lightly. Time will give you the fairest answer. Don't force yourself into a corner with no way out. Leaving yourself some leeway in everything isn't being conservative or cowardly. It's being responsible for the long term. Only if you can withstand the worst-case scenario will you have a chance to wait for the best outcome. At the end of the day, the most remarkable thing about Buffett's life has never been how much money he made, nor that he once became the world's richest man, but that he proved one thing with nearly 100 years of his life. You can always remain honest and stick to reason. Treat the people around you well. No speculation, no shortcuts, no crossing the line, and still achieve tremendous success, living the way you want to live. This is the true value of the Snowball, and it's the most precious gift we can take away from him. All right, that's all for our discussion of this book. I hope it gives you some inspiration. I'm really happy to have spent another book's worth of time with you. I'm Uncle Da, reading some slower books in a fast-paced world. See you in the next book.